Let's continue to look at this example with activity-based costing. We've got our cookie company that's also going to manufacture cakes. This company has identified 4 different activities, which are mixing, baking, cleaning, and quality control, and they've come up with costs. These are called cost pools, so they will accumulate their costs into these cost pools. The next step is to find what the cost driver is for each of these cost pools. So they need to come up with a cost driver for mixing costs, baking costs, cleaning costs, and quality control costs. If you remember, cost driver is the item that drives the costs, and we use that as an allocation base to allocate our overhead costs. Once a company knows their activities and their cost drivers, they come up with the cost allocation rate. This is the rate that they use to allocate manufacturing overhead to jobs or products. Just like what we did in our plant-wide allocation, our simple allocation system, and our departmental allocation system, the way that you come up with this rate is it is equal to estimated total activity cost. Sometimes they'll call it indirect cost or manufacturing overhead. So estimated total activity cost divided by estimated total allocation base or estimated total cost driver. Sometimes they'll call it allocation base, sometimes they'll call it cost driver. And then we come up with 4 different cost allocation rates. So you'll have an allocation rate for the mixing cost, for baking cost, cleaning cost, and quality control costs. Remember, just like our simple allocation rate and our departmental allocation rate, these rates are calculated at the end of, let's say, the current year, and you're going to use this cost allocation rate to allocate overhead for all of the following year. So you're going to calculate this rate once at the end of this year. This would be the rate that we use for all of next year. Next, let's look at how we would actually allocate indirect cost or overhead to products. Remember, the allocation of overhead to products occurs during the year. We have 4 activities that we have identified, and we've calculated 4 activity allocation rates. How do we allocate it? What we do is we take our cost allocation rate for our mixing department and multiply it by the actual cost driver used for the mixing department, and that gives you how much overhead was allocated to our mixing department. Next, we take the cost allocation rate for our baking department multiplied by the actual amount of the cost driver used of the baking department, and that gives you the allocated cost for the baking department. Same thing for the cleaning department. Cost allocation rate multiplied by actual amount of cost driver used for the cleaning department equals to allocated overhead for cleaning department. And the same thing goes for quality control. Once you have these 4 amounts for each activity, your total manufacturing overhead or total indirect cost allocated is the sum of all those 4 activities. To summarize, first, in Chapter 3, we looked at the plant-wide allocation rate. We calculated one rate and allocated manufacturing overhead based on an allocation base. It was a very simple system, but it wasn't great. So what we did next was we refined it and came up with departmental allocation rates. There we calculated 2 or more rates depending on the department, how many departments the company had. Then we refined it further and used activity-based costing, where we calculated multiple rates to allocate manufacturing overhead or indirect costs. The departmental rates are more accurate than the plant-wide rate, but calculating multiple rates is the most accurate. What all these things do is reduce cost distortion, which is reduce the amount of over-allocated or under-allocated overhead. And with all these 3 methods, your method of calculation is the same. It's just that you're calculating either 1 rate, 2 rates, or multiple rates. The methodology and the The background and the calculation, everything is the same. It's just how many times you're doing that calculation that differs between one method and the other.